Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna from Florida. Welcome to the program. How are you?
Hey, Glenn. Very happy to be back on.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you. So you were in the Air Force, right?
I was.
And what did you do in the Air Force?
I did airfield management, worked with, actually, my first installation was the B-2 stealth bomber. So did flight plans, a lot of inspections, a lot of reading. Did not serve in combat. However, I definitely have an opinion or two on women in combat.
I'd like to hear it.
Okay, so first of all, yesterday during the confirmation hearings, Pete did incredible. They were trying to lock him into their sound clips or sound bites. But, the one thing that I kept hearing from the Democrats was they were taking his comments out of context in regards to women in the military. So Pete never said that he didn't want women to serve in the military. In fact, it's quite the opposite. But I have the same agreement in that there are certain roles that women should not be subjected to in the military, right? So in a lot of foreign countries, you'll see that there will be women-only sniper teams and or women-only teams that will see certain combat. Now, I preface this by saying that there has been a study that was done, and it showed that when women were placed in harm's way, that the natural instinct for men was to protect that woman.
Yep.
And that's the right thing to do. That's that quote-unquote toxic masculinity that the left tries to attack us with all the time.
That is human nature. We're born with that. But go ahead.
Men are born, right? And so when you have, though, a woman that's, let's say, placed on a special forces team, they come under fire. Hypothetically, that woman gets hurt. Instead of focusing on the mission as if it would be if there were just other men present, the men would then in turn go to protect that woman. And it could ultimately result in, more casualties, more people getting hurt, and then also jeopardize the success of the mission. And so I think when we're looking at, military policy as a whole, we need to take these things into account and consideration. And that's what Pete was saying. But, it's very easy because Pete is a white male for them to try to demonize him and paint him as this anti-woman, alcoholic womanizer, which is simply not the case. The other thing and the reason why I wanted to show my support for him was, look, Pete is a Christian. He has the Jerusalem cross tattooed on him. That doesn't mean that he's a Nazi, and that does not mean that he's a white nationalist. And so what I've been telling reporters is if Pete was so anti-minority, anything to do with what we stand for and values in this country, why would Jimmy Carter then have that same cross put on? They don't really have much of a response to that.
Yeah. All right. So do you agree with him? Because I took from him yesterday something else about the military. I have no problem with women in the military, with an exception of the natural order of things where I think men, I have to tell you, if one of the guys was captured by, Al-Qaeda, I would do everything I can to make sure that one of the members of my team, were safe, and I do everything that we should do. However, it's different if I know that the woman member of our team has just been captured. It takes on a different meaning to me because I know what's going to happen to her in compared to, Tom or Tim. And I think that is a natural instinct that you cannot get rid of, and you don't want to. The second thing that I think Pete was talking about is, and we saw this in the fire chief in Los Angeles, where she said, I'll talk to people and they'll say, well, you can't lift my husband out of our burning house. And her response was, well, he got himself into a place he shouldn't be, so why should I? Okay, that's ridiculous. Yeah. As long as a woman can physically do exactly what is required of the male, then I don't have a problem with that. Do you agree with that?
I would say that there still is, though, this aspect of psychology and certain situations where I don't think women should be placed, right? So right now what we're seeing is, and those are all great points, Glenn, right? So the military standards currently is that there are different standards for women and for men. That's just a fact. But there are also different requirements for different jobs, right? So like if you go in, for example, to be a fighter, you're required to lift X amount, whether or not you're a man or a woman in the military. But in that sense, I would say that when you're talking about conditions where you're living in the field, when you're talking about conditions when you know that there is going to be a psychological aspect and component, it doesn't mean that women aren't as good as men. I think that
Right.
there's been cases women can be better snipers than men are,
Yeah.
depending on what you're looking for job wise. But what I will say is, as far as my perspective is concerned, I don't think women should be required to register for the draft. I know that Senate Democrats were pushing that in the NDIA. And I also think that women should not be placed in certain combat roles
Agree.
in the military
Agree.
for those reasonings.
Agree. Let me switch topics with you. You were one of the biggest advocates for the UAP UFO disclosure. Any updates on that hearing? The updates on the New Jersey drones, and were you able to get David Grush into a skiff and get a classified briefing? And if so, what was your takeaway?
So I was not able to get Grush into a skiff. In fact, they were blocking that via not reactivating his security clearance. And so I'm hopeful with the new incoming administration, especially because as of right now, Marco Rubio is going through his confirmation for Secretary of State.
Yeah.
And Marco has been in the Senate one of the big advocates and supporters of looking into UAPs, aka UFOs, and then everything else associated with that. Now, what I will say is that I've been grossly disappointed and disgusted by how the Biden administration handled what happened with the Chinese spy balloon, which, to be clear, is different than a UAP.
Yep.
But the fact is that some of these drones are likely tied to not just hobbyists, but also to probably more nefarious actors. And that even if we had that information available to share to the public, I don't believe that the Biden administration would have done that because of how I saw how they handled the drone. Yeah, the balloon traversing the United States and collecting intelligence nonetheless. It was
Right.
a Chinese intelligence operation. I had one of my colleagues, Van Drew, who actually made an omission on television that it was adversarial drones. And then you saw the intel community come out and poo-poo it, but Van Drew would not just make something like that up. So you're seeing kind of this rift occur with the intelligence community and then people that do want the American people to simply know the case. Now, I think that this is probably a topic of longer discussion in regards to what a UAP is. But what's interesting, Glenn, and I know that you look at these things through a lens, as do I, as a Christian, first and foremost.
Right.
But what was interesting when I was questioning Grush, I actually asked him, well, what would you consider, in so many words, is this like a physical entity? And he kept calling these things interdimensional beings if we're specifically referencing UAPs. And so I think that that's just a lens and perspective to think about this from. I think that there's a lot. If you would have talked about this even 10 years ago, your political career would have been over. People would have said you were a conspiracy. I can tell you that this is probably the number one question I get. No matter where I'm at in the country, people come up, they've seen the hearing, they appreciate it because everyone's curious. So I'll leave you with that.
So let me just let me just follow that here just a little bit. The interdimensional beings. That could be spiritual. That could be a quantum being. Any idea what he meant by that?
I actually tried to pull on that string, and he did not want to go there. And then I can also tell you that when I was talking to him with a group of other legislators on the phone prior to the hearing, that he did make the omission that he was actually in fear of his life and that something had happened where they tried to kill him. So I don't know if that was associated, but he did not want to go into that any further. And so based on my investigation, based on what we were told in the hearing, I would say that it does not seem like it would be a good thing that he gave me the impression that this was nefarious. And so take that for what it's worth. If interdimensional, I think quantum could be,
Right.
I we're on the same page there.
So it is so bizarre that this kind of stuff is happening and we're not being told. Donald Trump said that he would talk about the drones on Tuesday. He said, give me a day to get settled in office. And he said, I'll find out the drones and I'll tell the American people. Should we know if that's China? Should we know the American people?
I think that it would be well within his wheelhouse. And I think that he wants the American people to start to trust their elected officials. This goes so much deeper than just having someone in the White House that's on your side, right? Because we know that, and from what I've gathered, has been bipartisan and bicameral, meaning the Senate, the House, and Democrats and Republicans have all been working on this together to get some answers and information. And there is a certain level of stovepiping that we've seen with information. And then also to the aspect of I, as a sitting member of Congress who sit on oversight and foreign affairs, was denied access by a general at Eglin Air Force Base, to whom I responded, who gives you the right and authority to tell a duly elected member and group of congressmen that they don't have access to a program that we write the damn checks for? You have no authority to deny us access. And so that conversation probably was not comfortable for that general. And
how'd that end?
Well, he left. He actually got up in the middle of our meeting and went on TDY, which any military member will tell you never happens. He left the meeting. He left the state. He got up and left.
Wow. Did you ever get an answer?
No. Representative Gates and Representative Burchett were also there to witness this. I've never seen that happen. And remember, I was in the military. He literally got up and left in the middle of the meeting, said he had orders to go TDY to the state of Georgia, and he never came back.
Are you concerned at all about some of the conversations? We just saw another video from James O'Keefe where he's talking to somebody who was, I think he claimed to be in the FBI, said he and others were meeting with generals to make sure that they had a control on Donald Trump. Are you confident at all this time around Donald Trump's going to be able to route that?
Oh, most certainly. And I say that has to do a lot with the confirmation of the Secretary of Defense. You know, top down, last time when President Trump was in office, I think that there was a lot of trust in people to do the right thing. And then he realized that the deep state was real and there were people that were just running, regardless of whether or not he was a Republican and whether they were Republicans or not, that they were working against his agenda because they didn't like what he stood for. But now what we're finding is there is going to be a group set up to go through these generals that, A, discharge military members based on vaccinations and boards. But the fact is that if you are a general and you're pushing wokeness ideologies or you're trying to undermine the objective of the commander-in-chief, you have no place in the Department of Defense, period.
No.
And so those people fired. And I look forward to that because I can just tell you from a congressional perspective, Glenn, I actually had an amendment in the National Defense Authorization Act to remove DEI from military training. And I have friends still in the military. And so someone at Ramstein Air Base actually sent me an email of a officer there that was directly undermining what we did at the congressional level, saying Congress has removed DEI, so we're renaming it. Please still proceed with the training. So guess what? That person is also going to be fired. And that's
Good.
really how you're going to stop at the DOD.
Good. You know, we were just talking about the deep state and being able to navigate through all of this. And it seems like the Biden administration has done nothing but just set little brush fires all throughout the government here in the last couple of weeks. One of which is Biden has just taken off the terror status and open up relations again with Cuba, which Trump is going to undo. I don't know why they're doing this. Anna?
Yeah, I'm here. You know, what I will tell you, Glenn, is I think that there are a lot of people now that Biden is out and that they have lost the House and the Senate that are trying to do anything last ditch to prevent and obstruct a incoming Trump admin. And I actually had spoken to Mike Lee about this months ago. And he was saying that they were even trying to, in the Senate, put in little nuggets of legislation in some of the bills that they were passing that would really prevent President Trump from doing anything to stop the spending in Ukraine as well. So in my opinion, yes, incoming Trump admin, especially with his foreign policy, is going to be extremely aggressive. And I know that I'm going to be aggressive. Remember, I also sit on foreign policy with our new chair, Brian Mast, who's extremely pro-Trump. And so we back the president's agenda, at least from a congressional perspective. But yeah, these people, to be honest with you, I've met with Biden. I've talked to Biden. But he knows that it's over for his legacy and his political career. So I just don't think he cares anymore.
I will tell you, I hope that we clean out the State Department, at least the 6th and 7th floor. A lot of people in the State Department have to go. The last question is on Tulsi Gabbard. I was surprised to see her go to DNI. She doesn't have a lot of experience with the deep state and intelligence. How do you feel about her preparedness for that, to be able to clean it out?
I think that because of the fact that she's been in the House and she understands how these agencies work, that gives her a leg up and a perspective as opposed to other individuals. But I think what's really interesting about her appointment is, remember, not only did you have the Democrat machine go after her, right? I mean, Clinton called her, that smeared her. The legacy media hated her when she ran for president, and then she was placed on a watch list. So I think in part of the reason why she was appointed is because she had those agencies weaponized against her.
Yeah.
And if you those positions, you're more at a personal level inclined to fix the problem because you know firsthand what it's like to be subject to their, prosecution and persecution.
Yeah.
And so I think she is going to obviously have a lot of opposition when she goes through confirmation. But the one thing that she has is she used to be a Democrat. So I hope that she throws it right back into their faces.
I love that. Anna, thank you so much. God bless. Keep up the good work, and maybe we'll see each other this coming weekend in Washington, D.C.
Perfect.
Great. Anna Paulina Luna, the Republican from Florida.